Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday. Welcome to Pen Vicarage. Great to see you. So glad you could join us for our talk for today. As you know, we're in the 9th chapter of the Gospel of Mark. Just to remind you what happened yesterday, the incredible experience the disciples had when Jesus took 3 of them up a high mountain, and before them he was transfigured. He was changed before their eyes. Incredible experience. But just immediately after that, they're coming down the mountain, and this is what happened. So without further ado, Mark's Gospel, chapter 9, starting to read at verse 9. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them to tell no one about what they had seen until after the Son of Man had risen from the dead. So they kept the matter to themselves, questioning what this rising from the dead could mean. Then they asked him, "Why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" He said to them, "Elijah is indeed coming to restore all things. How then is it written about the Son of Man that he is to go through many sufferings and be treated with contempt? But I tell you that Elijah has come, and they did to him whatever they pleased, as is written about him." When they came to the disciples, they saw a great crowd around them, and some scribes arguing with them. And when the whole crowd saw him, they were immediately overcome with awe, and they ran forward to greet him. He asked them, "What are you arguing about with them?" Someone from the crowd answered him, "Teacher, I brought you my son. He has a spirit that makes him unable to speak, and whenever it seizes him, it dashes him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. And I asked the disciples to cast it out, but they could not do so." He answered them, "You faithless generation, how much longer must I be among you? How much longer must I put up with you? Bring him to me." And they brought the boy to him. When the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the father, "How long has this been happening to him?" And he said, "From childhood. It's often cast him into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you are able to do anything, have pity on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes." Immediately the child of the father cried out, "I believe, help my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd had come running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You spirit that keeps this boy from speaking and hearing, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." After crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted up, and he was able to stand. When he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we cast it out?" He said to them, "This kind can now come out only through prayer." This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, complicated this one. This is basically in 3 bits. The first bit, you've got the disciples and Jesus coming down the mountain. I've got to bear in mind, the disciples have had this incredible experience. They've been up this mountain, which says something about God doing something in the straight away already. Then you've got the cloud, which means the presence of God. Then you've got Moses and Elijah. And then you've got the shining face. All things pointing towards the greatness of Jesus. And finally, if they hadn't got the message by that point, they get this incredible voice from heaven. "This is my son, my beloved. Listen to him." In other words, it must have been an incredible experience. I wonder if Spielberg's got the film rights on it. It must have been quite an incredible, not quite, it must have been an incredible experience for them. And understandably, on the way down the mountain, they asked Jesus about it. And Jesus knows that his main focus in the next few days is going to have to die and rise again. And that's going to be his main focus. And with that in mind, he says to the disciples, "Don't talk about it now. Park it, put a knot in your hanky, park it for the time being. After I'm raised from the dead, then you'll understand." Because to dwell on it now would be confusing. It's very important at the moment that they focus on the fact that he's about to die for the people. That's what he has to focus on. And what he says is, take this experience, put a knot in your hanky, park it for now. After I'm raised from the dead, then you'll get it. As if to make the point, they kind of don't talk about that one anymore. So instead, I suppose, having seen Elijah, they say, there's this rumor around that Elijah must be risen from the dead. But even then he says, Elijah did come, but they did to him as they pleased, and they will do to the Son of Man as well. And in Return of Elijah, of course, they're talking about John the Baptist, and this suffering theme that Jesus wants them to get the message about, that John the Baptist, he came. He was the Elijah come back, if you like. But what they did to him is they beheaded him. And likewise, in the same way, Jesus wanted them to get the message that the Son of Man, he is about to die for the people. So that's the first thing, okay? They have this incredible experience, but Jesus says it's not going to make sense now. Park it for now. It'll make sense in time. But he wants to focus on the fact that for now, that he's about to die. And I suppose for us in our lives as well, sometimes great things happen and things happen to us in our lives and we don't understand them now. But somehow they'll make sense later. And sometimes we can look back on our lives and see, I get it now. And I think that's what he's saying to the disciples here. You know, this amazing experience you have, this transfiguration, park it for now. You'll get it after I'm raised from the dead. But for now, just park it. Focus for now on the fact I'm about to die for the people. So, he comes down. Anyway, as quite often happens when you have a really good time with God, when you come back to reality with a bump. And that's certainly what happens here. He comes into this crowd. There's a bedlam going on. The rest of the disciples, apart from Peter, James and John, have had this boy brought to them and they can't cast the evil spirit out of them. And it's difficult. And there's a lot I could say about this, but it's quite a long text. But I think there's an amazing bit here when Jesus discusses with the Father about faith. Because as I keep saying, Jesus works through our faith, not round our faith. He wants to work with us, not round us. And the man here talks here about, I believe, help my unbelief. And I think it demonstrates, and I think the same is true with us really, that we don't just have faith or not have faith. I think faith is a bit of a fluid thing. I think sometimes our faith is stronger than others. And I think in some ways we can have stronger faith in some aspects of our lives than in others. And when we question our faith, we're either questioning, is God strong enough or is God good enough to answer our prayers? Do we not have faith because we don't believe God's powerful enough? Or do we not have faith because we don't believe God is good enough? And I think what this does here, in this incredible passage that when the man says, I believe, help my unbelief. I think we all need a bit of prayer for that really. That we need reassurance of God's goodness. We need reassurance of God's power. And that, like I said, faith is a fluid thing. Faith is sometimes stronger than others. And sometimes it's stronger in some parts of our life than other parts. But I think we can pray like the man did. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. And I think that's a great prayer. I think we can learn from that. And let's pray to God that God will give us more faith too. That's really, really important. The upshot being, of course, that Jesus responds to the prayers, he responds to the crowd says, and he heals the boy, and the boy's fine. And having been tormented, the boy has peace. And Jesus brings peace to the boy's life. But again, as I say, it reminds us that our faith is an up and down thing, and we need to be reminded to pray that God will give us more of it. But then, of course, at the end, there's the third little bit, there's a couple of verses at the end when they have the kind of, debrief afterwards. And the disciples say, Jesus, why couldn't we cast it out? What went wrong there? And Jesus says this can only be cast out with prayer. And again, I think reminds us of the importance of prayer, the importance of communicating with God, that it's the importance of starting every day with God, the importance of being in God all our lives. That in all our do, with our gifts and our talents, but also our weaknesses and our insecurities, that we need to live life with God. And prayer is all about talking to God and listening to God and communicating with God. And frankly, without God, we're going nowhere. We're no help to us at all. But what this reminds us is the importance of prayer, the importance of clocking into God, of making sure that our lives are being guided by Him. That it isn't just a matter of exercising my gifts or whatever. It's about doing God's will. And it's about, clocking into Him, listening to Him, doing His will, and living life in His power. And for that reason, I think what he says is this can only be cast out with prayer. We need prayer in our lives. We need communicating with God. We need to be with God. We need to hear from God. We need to pour out our heart and our troubles to God. We need to be Him because life needs prayer. And I've come to the conclusion about the importance of prayer, that when I say morning prayer every morning, one way or another, and for me, prayer every morning is a bit like going out without prayer is a bit like going out without my shirt on. It's not a good thing to do. I need prayer. Who's it once said, 7 days without prayer make 1 week. Think about that. We need God. We need to communicate with God. We need to work through him, in him, and with him. And for that reason, we need prayer. We need to talk to God. So, 3 things this morning. There's this conversation with the disciples about parking the transfiguration experience, focusing for now on the death and resurrection of Christ. But he says the transfiguration will make sense in time. Secondly, it's the importance of praying. Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. It's about praying that God would make our faith stronger and help us to trust him in his strength and in his love. But thirdly, the importance of prayer, the importance of keeping close to God, keeping in him, listening to him, and bluntly doing it his way.